Before we dive right in, I just want to show you the framework for the college and career pathway endorsement. I'm sure many of you on this call are probably very familiar with this here, but just want to give a quick overview for those who may be new or unfamiliar to this concept. And so the college and career pathway endorsement essentially is a stamp that students can get on their high school diploma for earning all of these things here. And so the first step here, or criteria, I should say, in this process is individual planning. And so this is where a student is really thinking about their career goals, their academic goals for themselves, and what it is that they want to do as they progress beyond their high school. The second piece here is professional learning. And so this is heavily affiliated with work-based learning opportunities. So there's some career exploration, some team building, team based challenges, then also like some internship hours that are a requirement for students to earn the endorsement within this particular area. And so the piece that we're going to lean into and focus on within the model program of study guides are really the career focus instructional sequence and the academic readiness. And so as students are earning this credential on their high school transcript, all of these pieces here are requirements, right? But for the career focus courses, students are required to have earned at least 6 credit hours of early college credits. In addition to that, students need to be deemed ready for college, right? Academic readiness. And so we're defining that as students are ready for non-remedial coursework in reading and math by high school graduation. And so here's some really cool numbers here just for you all to grapple with. So I need to update that. That was class of 2024. There were over 2,400 students who graduated with an endorsement on their high school diploma. So again, the class of 2024, and 280 plus school districts. And it varies from rural to suburban to urban. Then, of course, traditional, CBE, CTE, pathway districts. And so you'll see how we've marked all of the districts throughout the state that are offering these particular credentials for students. And so these schools are considered early adopters. And so our hope is that we will see many more of these little dots here across the state of Illinois. And so the big key takeaway here is that July 1, 2025, which is the date that is rapidly approaching, many districts will choose to continue offering college and career pathway endorsements. And then other districts will also hop on this particular bandwagon, so to speak, too. There is an opt-out process for institutions as well, so I want to uplift that. But our hope is that many districts will continue with this trend of offering endorsements. And so as you can see, there is a number of endorsements that are required for each particular class, and that's based on the number of students enrolled in that particular institution as well. So one endorsement offered by 27, 2 by 29, and 3 by 31. And so these are the number of endorsements that school districts have to offer for students. And so as we're thinking about this initiative, the College and Career Pathway Endorsements, one thing that I want to uplift here is that the model program of study guides is a tool that institutions are utilizing as they are creating those course sequences, right? So as you saw in the framework, 6 credit hours of early college credit, and then also academic readiness is a requirement for students to earn this credential. And so how do you get there? How do we ensure that our students are taking, courses that make sense, that are going to accelerate them to and through a particular industry sector, and courses that are suitable for dual credit? Here is a proven process here, and this is uplifted in the model program of study guides. And so what you see here are a list of steps or a list of tools that kind of help institutions, that's community colleges and school districts alike, to think about what dual credit courses are are going to give students the biggest bang, for their time. And so that process includes identifying high priority occupations. And so that's really thinking about the labor market data, either within the state or even within that particular region or area of which your school district lie. Then once you identify those particular occupations that are going to provide students with a living wage, the next piece is to think about the credentials or certificates or degrees that are going to help students obtain that particular job. Then after we know what those degree programs are, we're going to look at their courses at the community college level to think about which courses should we identify for dual credit, right? Again, it all ties back to the academic program, the labor market data, helping students land those high priority occupations there. And so after those dual credit courses are identified, we think about a full course map, right? Like course sequencing. How do we organize these courses in a way, again, like I stated before, that we give students the biggest benefit for their time, that's going to accelerate them to their career path and then also decrease their time to completion within their academic trajectory. And then lastly, we identify some competencies, some technical related competencies as well. Generally, we created these guides, but they usually take about like a 6-month process for us. I'm going to kindly ask that Laura, if she hasn't done it already, to drop the link in the chat to the guide. So if you just wanted to kind of peruse through them, to kind of get an understanding of how they work, or follow along with me as I go along this process too. And so right now, they are titled Updated Model Program Study Guides because they have gone through a comprehensive review. And so one thing we know about labor market data is that it's always constantly evolving. And so during this past year, we went through updated labor market data, reviewed our course sequences, and just made sure that we are upholding the integrity of the work that was done within these guides. And so what you see here, I'll start with like the far right. Again, you'll see that labor market table there. You'll see some degree academic programs, and then there are the uplifted dual credit courses. And so the example that I'm going to show you here is the Model Program of Study Guide in Information Technology. And so we're going to take some time here and kind of go through this step by step so you all have a clear and concise understanding of the updated pieces here. And so this is how we identify our labor market data. Again, this example is pulled directly from IT. And so you'll see we have academic programs here to the far left. We also uplift those particular programs that are suitable for transferring to the 4-year degrees right off top. The typical jobs there, if you have access, or Laura will send out the slide deck at some point, but once you get it, you can click on those links there and it takes you directly to Career One Stop, which kind of shows you some of this labor market data that you see here. The next column, we uplift the living wage potential. And so you'll see there's that is categorized as high, medium, and then in some cases low. Low is not identified on this one, but in others it is. And so that we use the MIT's labor markets living wage calculator to identify those wages that are high, provide a high living wage, a medium living wage, and a low medium wage for our students. You'll see the hourly wage listed there. And then for the growth, we're asking our question, the question of like, is this job going to be around for years to come? Right. And so you'll see how we kind of outline a percentage change there. So, for example, computer and information system managers, 8% growth over 10 years for that particular role. And then we uplift the annual job openings in our states, and then the typical educational requirements. And so what's new here that was not in the previous iteration of these is this living wage potential category. And so we wanted to make sure that students understood what it meant, in terms of a living wage. And so we categorized it as high, medium, and low, just so that way they can kind of have an understanding of the different categories of wage here. And so again, as we think about those occupations in our state or within a particular region, depending on how these model program study guides are customized for a particular region, we do a backwards mapping process from the labor market data into the academic space to really think about how to tie in those academic credentials into those occupations. And so you'll see that process here. Those same categories that were listed in the labor market data are also listed here within the academic context as well. Here's where it gets fun, right? So from the academic programs, we do some desk research where we research academic courses within programs that are affiliated with those occupations. And so when we are uplifting particular dual credit courses, we're thinking about many things, right? We want to make sure that these courses are suitable for dual credits, number one, but also, as I stated, are going to give students the biggest bang for their time. So we want to choose courses when we can, based on the particular sector, teacher credentialing. There are many criteria here, but in the perfect world, we want to make sure that, the courses align with the Illinois Articulation Agreements, right? So that these courses can follow a student from high school all the way through their 4-year degree if they so choose to go that far. We think about courses that are AP, right? Courses that offer students a particular credential so that students are indeed college and career ready. So if they have that credential or earn it while they're in high school, they're able to go into the field and get a high priority occupation or a credential that leads to or stackable into a high priority occupation. And so if you're following along with me in the guide itself, you'll see that there is a table associated with the symbols that you see here. And so these symbols represent, of course, like I stated, Illinois articulation, if it's AP, if it has a credential associated, et cetera. And so similar to the college and career pathway endorsements, you see that there are many ways that a student can easily earn those 6 credit hours of career focused instruction, right? And then right below the career focused instructional courses, in the gray boxes, you'll see those general education courses there. And so you'll see the math, then also an English sequence too, which leads to a student being ready for non-remedial coursework in their community college educational process as well. So all of this work here pretty much ties directly into the college and career pathway endorsement. Again, the model program study guides is a tool that supports that particular framework. And so as we have entered into our second phase of our model program of study guides, It's important for us to really think about the utilization of this work across our state. And so we've been working diligently with ICCB to really think about ways on how we understand how this work is being implemented and supported statewide. And so one way that we've done that is through a utilization report. And so that process entails us working with various community colleges throughout our states and leveraging the research that they have in terms of the dual credit courses that they're offering at their institution to their partner high school districts. And so what we've done is we've been able to review that work in various sectors, right? And we've been able to participate in some interviews and focus groups with our community colleges about their course sequences, right? And how they align with the model program of study guides. And so we've taken that work, we've summarized it as Sarah, I'm sorry, as Laura sends this information out to you all, I will make sure to link in the email the final results of both of our utilization reports so that you all have access to it. And so some results that I just want to uplift here is as a result of the work, it is clear that institutions value more customized regional maps. And so the maps that you see now are statewide maps. But what we found is that it's extremely beneficial for a community college or a particular region to really think about how they want to package these guides or dual credit courses in their area for each particular industry sector. And so we are actually engaging in that as a result of this work with Lake County area. We're developing regional maps for that area so that a group of high schools who are affiliated with the College of Lake County will have a full package of dual credit courses that align to the model program study guides, but also align to the college and career pathway endorsement. And so what this does is it reduces those random acts of dual credit, right? Oftentimes we find that high schools, do they create courses that are in the best interest of our students, right? Which is great because it's a student-centered approach. However, we want to be more strategic and more comprehensive with that process and encourage high school districts and community college to think about not just those courses that are of high interest to students, but those courses that are going to lead to a meaningful wage, that are going to decrease their time to completion, that are going to accelerate them towards either their academic and career goals, as well as their personal interests too. Another result of this work is we're in the process of developing a faculty training program for the model program of study guides. And so this is critical because we want to encourage our faculty and our community college to be good stewards of this work as well. So when when a high school district comes to a community college and say, hey, I want to offer this random dual credit course, the faculty member will be well equipped to say, yeah, I hear you. I think that course, is students may be interested in it. However, let's think about how do we include courses that are going to support them more comprehensively and more strategically as they're thinking about future careers and living wages for themselves and for their families. And so with that being said, we want to take a moment to get your thoughts and feedback about this process and how you all are utilizing or how you can utilize this work in what you do with your various communities or partners. And so we are going to have 3 different breakout rooms, and it's up to you to choose where you want to go. But the first breakout room will be focused on secondary education. The second one will be post-secondary. The third one will be policy and advocacy. And so the focus of these breakout rooms is to really open up a discussion about how these guides can be utilized in your work and how we can push this piece forward within our partners and our communities. So I'm going to turn over to Laura to give us some clear directions on how we want to organize this here.
Yes. So as Megan mentioned, we'll leave it to you to self-select. We understand that some people work clearly in one of these particular spaces, and some people, they bridge multiple of these. So if that's you, where your work kind of overlaps, feel free to pick whichever one you'd like. For example, if you're from a state agency and you want to go policy and advocacy, great. If you are from a state agency that works more specifically with just one population, you can pick whichever room fits best for you. We have specific questions that are going to be shared with you when you get into the breakout room for each group. And then we are going to come back. For the sake of time, we're not going to fully report out everything, but I think if each group could have one person prepared to share one or two key takeaways from your conversation, I'm just going to do a quick kind of check-in for what are the big takeaways that you came up with. So with that, I will open up the breakout rooms. We'll be in there for about 10 minutes or so. I'll send an announcement a few minutes before we wrap up so everyone knows to kind of get things wrapped up. So let me open the rooms. And you should be able to just self-select your own room. If folks have any problems with that, I'll be here until we get everybody in a room. They should be open at this point.
I'm not seeing it.
Okay, let me try again.
While we're waiting, Megan, I just want to point you to the chat. Michael has a great question there.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Sarah.
Okay, it's there now. Join the breakout room is there, but I want to hear the answer to Michael's question, so I'm not going to go yet.
Yeah, so I think ISB SIP guides are important and are a great resource as well. So we encourage you to utilize that too. But I know the model program study guides, are a guide that institutions can use to customize for their particular region. So build to our community colleges or for your institutions. I think you can use both, would be my response to that.
Are they aligned though at all? I guess is my question. Is there any intentional alignment between the two?
There is some alignment. I know our guides are more rooted in labor market data and information. And so we encourage institutions to, think about that as well. But for the college and career pathway endorsement, the goal is the 3 credit hour or the 6 credit hour attainment for students. And so if the courses within ISB's SIP guides align to that, then I think that's totally fine.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure if I'm answering that question fully. So let me gather my thoughts. Let me do some research here, and then as Laura sends out a follow-up email, there will be a more robust response to that question as well.
Megan, I just wanted to point out that Nancy had her hand up before we.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that if it's not, I love the idea about the local working together, the regional document and working towards the SIP, because as the funding formula has changed, that's going to play a huge piece about making sure that those SIP codes are aligned for these guides, because that's going to be a larger focus for the secondary schools than the bigger picture, right? I mean, hopefully they fit, and typically they will, but when they don't, in my region, it's gonna be the funding over the bigger picture. So just something to keep
Absolutely.
in mind in
Yeah.
your region, so.
Yeah, I think like I would say probably since the SIP codes and everything and the course guides for the SIP are so long well established and have been relied upon in secondary education for so long that it's our job to make sure ours align to them, not vice versa, because theirs is long, long, long established. And the post-secondary institutions really have to go by them. So when we're coming up with this, I think we have to keep that existing framework that's relied upon in mind and align to it.
Thank you so much, Dina and Nancy, for those thoughtful responses. I really appreciate that. I think that is something that we need to explore on our end, and really think strategically about how we're moving forward. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Awesome. I like this. Seems like there's some good thoughts starting. So let's get to the breakout rooms and get looking at some of these questions and hopefully discuss a little bit further. Welcome back to this main session. We are a little behind schedule, but this is so robust and like I am so excited by the things people are talking about that I would still like to do a very quick, just like check in, one takeaway or two takeaways from each group. So we'll just go 1, 2, 3. So 1 was secondary. Is there anyone in that group that has just like 1 or 2 key takeaways from your conversation?
Yeah, we forgot to do that. I don't know if Michael or Nancy want to share.
Nobody got voluntold.
Nancy, go ahead.
Well, Michael had some concerns about using local labor market data versus statewide data that we were kind of talking about. And then I just was curious of like who the target audience would and how this tool would be used, like from a secondary perspective. Are we using this just as kind of like a guide to start a conversation between secondary and post-secondary? Are we using it for counselors to help students, on a pathway? And we could have had a lot more time to dive into it. We were also talking just about, the alignment within the SIP codes and, the consideration around that. But I think using this as a guide for bigger conversation within your own region, at least there's a lot of information contained in it that can get you kind of like the PACE framework, right? Looking at the PACE framework and then customizing it for your region. At least it gives you kind of an outline of where you should be headed. And then you plug in the pieces that make sense in your region.
Thank you. What about the post-secondary group? Any takeaways from your conversation? Anybody get voluntold?
I'm going to pick on Dina here in the moment.
We were deciding on it right when we broke, but as usual, those of you on the call who know me, I was talking and I was like, yeah, so we were also, that could have gone much longer in discussions. It's a really rich topic, and we were talking about other resources that could be engaged, like, for example, collaborating with career services and post-secondary world, both 2-year and 4-year, to take a look at how these, again, the alignment kind of with the SIP codes, but also how you can kind of advise students who might be interested in that early stage of just going for when they, the job that gives them an immediate kind of pay, but making sure that the information includes what would it essentially hopefully be an incentive to look at more long term at what's needed in those career fields and how that plays out over the course of your, not just a job at 18 that would get you X dollars an hour, but, you know, more, be more fruitful in your life holistically as you get down the line in your 30s and have a family and things like that. I think we also got to talking about the interest in seeing specific ones of these, and fortunately, Megan was kind enough to guide us to that. But because I was like curious to see the one for education and so forth, so we had just kind of scratched the surface on what felt like it could have been a really good conversation. And Stephanie, I know you, and I am having trouble pulling to mind, but I know you had you were talking about also viewing it through the lens of equity and making sure how we can maybe use these to make sure that we encourage students, underrepresented students towards certain fields where they are underrepresented. Did I say that right?
Absolutely.
Well, thanks. That sounds like, I know this is a conversation, or this is a topic where we could discuss for a long time. I had a hard time pulling the trigger on the breakout rooms because my group was discussing some really interesting stuff, which leads to the last of our three groups. If we have any quick takeaways and a volunteer from the policy and advocacy group. Oh, Richard.
Richard or Amy to share.
I was going to volunteer Richard, but his seat is empty. So, Amy, do you have any thoughts?
Sure. I think that a broader theme was that we really appreciated how these guides can help guide students to have very intentional course offerings, and then making sure that those courses are going to be aligned to their career goals and they're getting the skills that they need. They're also useful tools to, talking about to students about how what their wages might be, what their employability might be, and then they're good tools for talking to legislators to try to show how these are very kind of holistic processes that connect secondary to post-secondary. And I mean, I think all of those is like a long way of saying, very intentional, no random acts of dual credit or no random acts of really any coursework.
Thank you. Awesome. I'm sorry that I had to cut off the conversations. We do have other things to cover today. And I think we can make it all work and fit, but I do appreciate how robust this discussion has been and how much everybody has to think about and say about the questions that we put forth to you. So with that, thanks for
Laura, can you,
Megan, do you got something?
I have one, I see there's a question in the chat here before we move forward. It's from Michael, and he's asking who should be using the model program study documents as a tool for career exploration and how it aligns with the PACE framework. So I know my colleagues Heather and Danya. I saw Heather on here for sure. So Heather, I'm gonna pick on you to kind of jump in here to kind of help answer this question if possible.
I mean, I think that might be thinking about what courses and pieces students would be doing along with that. So you have in the model program study guide, it follows the continuum of work-based learning along the bottom. If you read the narratives of those, they'll offer some additional insights into what kind of career exploration could be happening as you're moving along the guide, but they are kind of focused on the courses. So you could think about as you're engaging students in career exploration opportunities and thinking about that continuum and what grade that's happening within the PACE framework. You could also align that with how they're being exposed to that content and information through the courses that they're taking. So the whole work-based learning is getting connected to what's happening on the curriculum side of courses and making sure that tie is more intentional, right? If you're being intentional about the sequence of courses, the sequence of work-based learning, those things could really support one another. If that's helpful. If I didn't answer that and I just rambled, let me know.
Thank you, Heather and Megan. For the sake of time, I'm going to move on to our other slides, but if anyone has more questions for Megan or about the model program study, feel free to just throw them in the chat. The next thing on our agenda today is a little bit about transitional instruction. So first off, just being, we're announcing that the virtual version of the QL Stats Transitional Math course is now approved for statewide portability and available. So that is exciting. This has been something that's been in the works for a while. Shout out to Heather. She really put in the work on this one. This virtual transitional math course was designed sort of with the goal of offering an option to, maybe smaller districts or more rural districts where they have trouble implementing transitional math because they may not have enough students to fill a full class. Also, maybe teacher issues. So this course is one option for now available for districts that are kind of in that position to implement transitional math. So this course, with a little bit more detail on the next slide, this course was adapted using the state model curriculum for transitional math. So if your district is offering transitional math in the building and you're familiar with that model curriculum, that's the same thing that was used to develop this virtual course. It's primarily asynchronous with some synchronous components. And then students, like those synchronous components, are scheduled around the student schedules. But this is just another kind of neat option that is available. I know transitional math has been around a little bit longer. We're kind of past the point where a lot of districts have implemented it or opted out, but this I think is another opportunity, especially if your region or your district has opted out previously, to maybe reconsider now that there are some new options available. And just kind of for context, putting with today's conversations about CCPE and how all these policies are aligned, Megan shared the framework earlier and talked about the push with 3296 to have districts implementing the college and career pathway endorsement. And while math was legislated in the PWR Act, transitional English is not, it's optional. However, just kind of like to remind folks that even though transitional English is not required, or districts may have previously opted out of transitional math, it's something to think about, again, kind of as you're going through these endorsements, because the academic readiness component is a key component of the endorsement, and it requires that students are academically ready for non-remedial coursework in math and English. And if we look at what those indicators are that determine if a student is academically ready for math or English, this is what is kind of right now currently established as the metrics for that. And transitional English or transitional math completion is a really good option for the students who are not already getting put in those early college credit courses to still meet that requirement. So that is just sort of hey, transitional instruction is still here and happening. Here's some new things. Here's why it's still relevant. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, but this is just kind of a brief check-in. We're excited about this virtual course. I think Megan just shared a flyer. So if you think your district might be interested in this virtual transitional math course, it's through Illinois Virtual Schools. And there is a flyer that they have shared with us that we are sharing with all of you. So if you're interested, take a look with that. I think it has some contact information for how to get in touch with IVSA if you were thinking maybe you want to offer this in the future in your district. Some policy and legislative updates. So not too much because we're kind of entering in the veto session, but just a couple things that we're looking out for. The big thing that is probably going to have some movement here is higher ed funding, which we'll get to in a bit. And then some possible movement on dual credit. And I'll give a little bit of a bullet point, but Amy, I know that you're on here, so I may let you chime in if you have any additional things to add. But basically with the dual credit, this is a follow-up from the spring, the bill, House Bill 5020, which did not pass, focused on dual credit and professional development plans. It sounds like there's a possibility that there is potentially some pieces of this around the professional development provisions that are going to get kind of sectioned out through the veto session. And I think that there's potentially some stakeholder engagement happening with the legislators kind of around this particular bill. Amy, are there any other additions, notes here to add around this dual credit bill?
No, I think your summary was really good. I will plug next week, the dual credit think tank is meeting. They had a survey talking about the bill and talking about kind of key provisions in there and what they would like to look at for the veto session. So I encourage everybody to connect with Jason Klein at the dual credit think tank to attend those meetings next week.
Awesome. Dina, I see you raise your hand.
Yes, I had to step away for just a quick second and missed those last couple of slides. Is there a, do you have a copy of that, or are we gonna, you're
The
gonna provide
slides?
the slide deck? Yeah.
Yes, they'll be shared after the meeting on the policy committee
Okay,
website.
great, because I know that I will be asked about this last particular section. And because Sophia, you guys know Sophia, she's usually on here too. She couldn't be here today. And I just so happened that the moment I had to step away was when you got into the veto session legislation update slides. So
yeah,
I'd love
no
a
worries.
copy. Thank you.
Yes, and then the other piece here is higher ed funding, which we had originally asked Mike from PCC if he wanted to share anything. He shared with us this slide. This is not a space that, you know, the Success Network or Ed Systems gets particularly involved in. So I am just going to let you look at this. I do think from what I looked at our participants, we may have some folks from Advance or PCC who are kind of leading the charge on this work, who, if you just want to, you know, say like anything about kind of what the goals are here or what's in this, you know, feel free to unmute. I think I saw some of you on here, but otherwise I'll just let you all look at this. And if you have questions, you want to learn more about the work around equitable funding, Mike from PCC, you can feel free to contact him. All right. Another piece here is that ICCB finalized their multiple measure placement rules. So this is something that has been in the works for a while, but now it's just finalized. So basically, stipulating kind of colleges will accept any of the defined multiple measures for placement. So that could be GPA in high school, transfer credit, transitional courses. So we talked about, you know, the virtual transitional math, transitional English, traditional transitional math, or transitional math, yeah. And then colleges need to publicly share their placement policies so that they're accessible, and then report their DevEd reform plans to ICCB. So these are finalized rules that have come through ICCB's approval process. So that, I think, is the last of our policy updates. We are kind of back on track with time, so I'm impressed with myself. So the rest of our meeting is still a little discussion heavy. Like I said, we really wanted to give this kind of a mix up, so it's not just me and Megan talking at you, which it often is. And I appreciate that you listen so intently, but we want to hear from you all too. So this is kind of a place to check in. So it's been mentioned several times throughout the topics we've covered today, but that push that has come for the college and career pathway endorsement implementation from House Bill 3296 and the PWR Act, and just kind of to check in with folks. A lot of you are kind of on the ground in your district, your regions, working to establish these endorsements. And so we want to kind of check in, and we have a couple questions on the next slide just about, you know, how it's going for folks. So, you know, what kind of successes have you seen? Where have you encountered roadblocks? Are there resources you have found helpful? Kind of on the flip side of that, is there information or support that you would like to see? So this we're going to discuss kind of in the larger group. So I'll open it up for anybody who has thoughts on any of these questions, but we kind of wanted to just check in with y'all on this. I feel like y'all were having such robust conversations in those breakout rooms. I feel like there are people who have some thoughts on these questions. But it's always kind of breaking the ice on who's going to be the first to.
Or are we going to go into breakout sessions and discuss this, or do you want to discuss it here?
We can discuss it here.
I mean, the only thing I would really say to the group and is everyone that is going to do a college and career pathway endorsement, like don't wait until like December to put all your stuff in IWOs. So it's transitioning into IWOs. It's relatively easy to do, but there's 2 steps to it. And just so everyone knows, like Heather Lucan from ISB is really in charge of this, but Heather's retiring in February. So like I would say get your stuff going now. Like as a region, like we've gotten 2 of our schools 100% approved already and working on the other 4. So like these are things that if you're in this space and working with the schools or assisting or at a school level, like get going on it now. And then figure out like what your plan is like for next year. Like we have a cohort program at Triton College and we're working on what our cohort's going to look like for FY26 and how CCPEs fit in with this. So like do that planning, like discuss these, but really like the clock is ticking on getting these things approved. So I would highly encourage everyone. I think Nancy is the date December 15th or 14th when you have to at least submit things into ISB. And I don't know the exact date. Maybe Nancy does.
Yeah, it's definitely December. I think 15th sounds right.
Nancy, since you just turned your camera on and I see your comments in the chat, could you elaborate a little bit about the education pathway? What's been the roadblock there?
So initially we were able to use speech and AP Psych as one of our 6 credits, and as of next year, we're supposedly not allowed to use those. And because community colleges really don't have, we're fine with early childhood, but with like the education pathway, they really don't have a lot of education courses on their menu that, or second roadblock is we're having a problem finding teachers that meet the credentialing requirements. And so we're in jeopardy of at least 2 of my districts losing the ed pathway that has previously been approved because they just don't exist. So we've been pushing hard to keep speech in for teaching just because it is such an integral part of, the teaching profession, that just because the prefix doesn't say EDU, you're not really going anywhere unless you have speech. And then to the currency, the so what, why do kids want this? Like, and then communicating that to stakeholders. We're really, it started out with a community college currency, but I just think we need more.
I would add on to that. I was at an area career center meeting last Friday, and that was a large discussion of their meeting was like how can area career centers partner with colleges for dual credit, and some of these roadblocks that come up, like Nancy's saying, like there's certain areas, especially in Southern Illinois, and maybe Nick can speak to this too, that like there's not a partner for a school to do dual credit. Like there needs to be something opened up. And I think that right now the community colleges, and depending on where you are, like we have a great relationship with us at Triton College, but talking to some of the schools south of Route 80, like they don't. And I mean, when I was in Peoria, we had a lukewarm, kind of relationship with Illinois Community College. I mean, it was like everybody has a different relationship with community college. And I think somewhere along the line, ICCB and ISBE needs to get together and say, look, you guys are in the same sandbox. Let's play well together. Because I hate to get to a point where we're going to start partnering, high schools are going to start partnering with 4-year universities. And then the community colleges start screaming and saying like, well, what about us? What about us? Well, right now there's not this collaborative environment across the state of Illinois.
Yeah, I would agree with that, although I don't have that problem here. I hear that a lot from colleagues around the state, that they deal with just the lack of partnership, and it can be on both ends between their high schools and their community college. I mean, I just think here locally, I mean, when you really look at the components of the college and career pathway endorsement, it's a pretty high bar. And, you know, unless all of those things are being done kind of through one program. So for instance, we, you know, our, what we call Early College and Career Academy, which is somewhat similar to a career center. You know, if we do all of the components within our program, that's one way we're going to be able to get some of these things approved. But for the ones that we can't do that, and there are several, I mean, it's a pretty high bar in convincing schools, and then, you know, convincing schools that they need to convince students to do some of these things. And then maybe even more importantly, teachers, there has been a pretty big challenge. And, you know, it's just, when they're dealing with, and specifically with CTE programs, we have a big shortage of qualified CTE teachers where I'm at. And, you know, so trying to get across to principals, CTE department chairs, superintendents, you know, let's really embrace this framework. They sometimes throw up their hands, and it's like, we're just trying to keep people in classrooms and keep these programs running, you know, as opposed to putting all of our energy into really kind of pushing something like college and career pathway endorsements forward. That's just kind of an honest assessment of where we're at here.
And I know Edith put that in the chat, but I would say that there's very little currency out there as far as the community college doing anything for students that have earned this college and career pathway endorsement. And I think the only four-year university that's really doing anything is NIU, unless I'm mistaken. And I think that's another piece of the puzzle. Like, what are students getting for this? Like, what is it? I don't think the employers know enough about what it is, and the colleges don't know enough about it. And to me, again, our community colleges should be stepping up, saying they value this. Students earn dual credit from them. Like, we're going to give them something, even if it's one class for free, or if it's, you know, some kind of entry into a program. Like, but there's nothing going on. Again, at the area career center meeting, I said, well, I thought Joliet Junior College was doing this. And they came back to me and said, well, they were doing it when NIU gave them a grant, but now they're not doing it anymore. There's no currency at Joliet Junior College. And I know Juan Jose was like a big leader in this and pushed this with a lot. And I don't know where it's going. So Edith, I appreciate, you know, you making that comment, because I think that's a one piece I think needs to come back.
Hey, Michael, this
Megan
is
can probably
Megan.
speak to this. Yeah, go ahead,
hi.
Megan.
Thank you. Hi, Michael. Megan Mitchell here. So I hear you. There is lots of work that needs to be done in creating like statewide currency, right? Like, how do we institutionalize this process and have the capability to use statewide funding to support this work across the board at our public institutions? But I do just want to lean in here for a moment and just confirm that there are several institutions, two-year institutions throughout our state that are providing currency. And even beyond two-year institutions, there are some school districts that are getting creative in thinking about ways to create currency. For example, in Vienna, those students who graduate in the education pathway and go on and, you know, receive their four-year degree, they're eligible to receive a interview for a job of which they're eligible for. And so those are creative ways that, you know, some districts are paying for toolkit opportunities for students in like welding and manufacturing. But we have entered into our second cohort of institutions that are offering currency options for institutions. We're going through those particular trainings and community of practices too. And so another thing on Uplift that, although it's not statewide quite yet, ICCB is adding a question in funding sources for community colleges that center around currency. So, for example, when for two-year institutions apply for funding, they have to identify what their currency options are for the college and career pathway endorsement to be eligible to apply for some of their funding sources. So there is a push that is happening. I agree, there needs to be more, but we are working to build some momentum across our state to increase the number of currency options overall.
I was typing an answer, but now that Megan is done talking, I will stop typing. Mercedes, I see your question in the chat, and I think that that is a really good question about the diversity of CCP earners, specifically in education. That's definitely something that we have also noticed in the data that's coming back. And it's something that we, I think, are looking to kind of grapple with and understand more. I think kind of as we are, I think part of that is, you know, talking to the students, right? And I know that that's something in general, a lot of our work could include more. I know the currency work that Megan is doing, the institutions as part of their work are going and talking to their students about the endorsements and sort of like what would make it worth it to them. I do think there are also some questions that like we're currently grappling with that are not necessarily at the point where we have a clear, like, this is what needs to be done. But we're also kind of grappling with thoughts and issues about like placement and gatekeepers and, you know, how are districts deciding which students should pursue endorsements or offering them to students. And that's, I mean, these are, I think, are, you know, more robust conversations that take a little bit of time to navigate and figure out, but that is something that we have noticed. And it is something that I think is in our minds as we're kind of supporting folks with these endorsements.
Thanks, appreciate that.
Yeah. Unless there are any other like last notes or takeaways here, I have more questions for you all to discuss about something else. You're like, oh, I didn't know I signed up for all this conversation today. Any last thoughts on CCPE implementation? All right. My next questions are a little bit more broad. This is something that we have done a while ago with the policy committee meetings, but just kind of, I think, a good like check-in on like what's going on, what are folks hearing about policy and practice. So the first questions, and we don't have to like go one by one through these questions, but just to kind of get you thinking, the first piece here, you know, aside from some of the things that we already have talked about in this meeting about CCPE, which has been kind of our main focus, when it comes to these other aspects of, you know, PWR and college and career readiness, are there promising local practices that you would like to learn more about? Are there practices you've seen in your community that are helping or working to drive equitable outcomes? Are there other core challenges that your region is grappling with about like how to come up with policy to kind of work for those things? Any thoughts on these questions?
You know, I think with you having a virtual option for math and English, and have that for schools across the state, I think that's something that honestly you need to have a session just on that and have somebody from the Illinois Virtual School come in and talk about that. I think that's a game changer because like a lot in our region, a lot of students that don't earn the college and career pathway endorsement is because they're not proficient in English and math because they didn't get this SAT score or soon to be ACT score. So like I think that's one of the pieces that if we can kind of guide school districts to be more intentional from the get-go, from freshmen all the way up. I think right now we're like, oh, who's going to earn this? Who earned dual credit? Who did a team-based challenge? Who did dual credit? But then when we start looking at that English and math component, it knocks a lot of students out. And I think that's the equitable piece that kind of Mercedes was talking about. Like, Like, what are we doing to be more intentional? Because to me, it should be quality and quantity. It shouldn't just be a certain select few. And I think we need to encourage and try to get more students in this. And I don't think it's not that we're doing it on purpose, but I think we need to find out a way how to get these doors open for everyone. And I think it's just a great thing to do. Like Nick said, the ones that we seem to be successful with are our regional programs that we do at the college, like a career center. So we have 3 programs we're doing it, and we actually teach a course on Friday for employability schools, so students are prepared to go into work-based learning. Like, does the high schools do things like that? You know, like we had a big conference, Nancy was at it, that we're trying to get our schools to move away from co-op into work-based learning. I mean, that's a struggle. I would echo that, like, if you want to see a school district that's doing an outstanding job with CCPEs, it's the Naperville School District, and they just have a lot of resources. They're doing a lot of great things. I would ask Jill if she would come on and be part of this and share their journey, because it was very powerful for our schools to hear what they've done. So that's my 2 cents.
I appreciate that. I think the co-op to work-based learning piece, I mean, Heather would be able to speak more about how much that comes up, but I think that is a challenge that folks are grappling with for sure. Okay. A few more questions. Any other thoughts about like exciting practices, things you've seen other people around you doing that you want to learn more about? Or I'll move on to my last set of questions for you. Okay. So kind of exploring policy. So what emerging issues, policy-wise, that you have heard about, or maybe some innovative like state or local policy that you'd like to learn more about? I feel like there's been kind of like a lot of discussion about currency. I'm curious, for example, if there are thoughts people have about like, in your ideal world, right? Like, what would statewide currency look like? That's something I feel like I've had some conversations with people about, is they want statewide currency. And like, in your ideal world, what might that look like? Or kind of other.
You know, 2 years ago, we asked Marcy Johnson if the governor or the state superintendent would kind of say something about the students that earn that. And they did create a video 2 years ago, but that was never continued. And I think that's just something to acknowledge these students. If there could be something created, and if Tony did it, if Governor Pritzker did it, if just somebody to say, hey, and you could play that, you know, kind of at a school assembly or at graduation or whatever it is, to acknowledge these students that earn this. I don't think we broadcast this enough. I don't think we talk about the CCPs enough. The other piece about CCPs that kind of bothers me is that equitable piece, that this is really designed for students like going into a college setting. Like, we don't talk about the other professions and things that really go into, like, and I look at things like barbering, cosmetology, construction. I mean, we don't echo these things for all students. And I would kind of like CCPEs to, or if it's not CCPEs, if it's something else that we could get where these students are earning, I'll call it a workforce readiness certificate, or something to that fact, that they're prepared for life after high school. And I don't know how that's done, but I think that's something we need to look at, so all students feel valued.
Yeah, I know that piece of like, how is this going? Is it working as intended? Is it reaching the students that like we were looking to reach, kind of with the idea of this? That's definitely something that I know like us at Ed Systems, we're really interested in exploring, and like even sort of like advocating for how can we get like the state like to have like there's a saying I'm looking for that is escaping me, but like, how can we get the state to really feel invested in like reevaluating and looking at the PWR Act, and like if it's having the impact it's intended, and if it's not, like what's the issue, what needs to be done further, because those are definitely important questions.
Having skin in the game, is that the expression you were looking for? Put some skin in the game?
That is, yeah, something like that is what I was looking for. Thank you. All right. So I can move on to wrapping up unless anyone has burning thoughts that they want to share before we kind of conclude this meeting. All right. So just a couple announcements wrapping up. Obviously just encourage you to take a moment to kind of reflect if there's anything we missed, or if you're kind of thinking later on about like, ooh, that was really interesting that someone brought up, I want to learn more about it. You know, feel free to stay connected with us in between now and our next policy committee meeting. We will be sending out the materials and things. Upcoming from the Success Network and other events, there's a lot happening. So we have a webinar coming up that I think at least one or two people here are going to be presenting on about transfer partnerships on October 8th. Our next policy committee meeting will be December 11th. And then the Success Network Conference, save the date, is going to be February 25th in Champaign this year. So new location. So if you're, you know, in Central or Southern Illinois and you haven't been to the Success Network Conference, this might be a good time to join us for the first time. Another thing that I ran out of room on the slide for, Megan has shared in the chat, which is Success Network organizers ISAC have several different locations and dates coming up for their College Access Symposium. So look into those as well if you're interested in attending. I think all of the registration for the various dates and location are linked on that page. And then when we share the slides, the links for everything else on here are in the slides. I'll send out an email to everyone kind of with the material and information from today, but also if you're looking for things and you can't find my email because Outlook search feature is useless, then feel free to just go to the policy committee website and it will all be posted there. That's all for us today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your participation in all of our discussions. I feel like lots of really interesting insight and robust conversation today. And I am grateful for all of you for being here and being a part of it.